The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never been so loud. Representatives from 100 different worlds shouted over each other. Their voices mixed into a storm of noise that echoed off the ancient stone walls. At the center of their argument was a single image floating above the council floor. It showed a ship, but not just any ship. The Ascendant hung in the darkness of space like a sleeping giant. Its hull was black and smooth, covered in patterns that seemed to shift when you looked at them too long. The ship was old, older than any civilization currently sitting in this hall. The species that built it had vanished 10,000 years ago. They left behind only ruins, mysteries, and this one perfect ship. For centuries, the Ascendant had been lost. Now a mining vessel had found it drifting near a dying red star. The discovery had sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Everyone wanted the ship. Everyone knew that whoever controlled it would hold power beyond imagination. But there was one very big problem. No one could make it work. They had tried first. They were considered the greatest engineers in known space. Their ships were elegant and precise. Their scientists had spent 3 months aboard the Ascendant and left with nothing but headaches and broken equipment. The ship systems made no sense to them. Wires that led nowhere. Panels that contained crystals instead of circuits. Doors that refused to open no matter what commands were given. They tried next. They were an ancient species, nearly as old as themselves. They kept records of everything. Surely they could find some clue in their vast archives. But they lasted only 2 weeks aboard the Ascendant. They declared the ship haunted and refused to return. 5 more species attempted repairs. 5 more species failed. The ship sat there in the darkness, perfect and silent, keeping its secrets. And then stood up to speak. The council fell quiet. Was and species known for their patience and their skill with machines. He was old even by standards. His shell had faded from bright green to a dull gray. His 4 arms moved slowly now. But his eyes, all 6 of them, were still sharp and bright. "I know who can repair the ship," said. His voice was soft, but it carried through the silent hall. The council leaned forward. Here was hope at last. "Humans," said. "We must ask the humans." The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then the hall exploded with laughter. Humans, the youngest species to achieve interstellar travel. They had been flying between stars for barely 200 years. They were considered clever, yes, resourceful, good at surviving in harsh conditions, but they were also seen as primitive, emotional, chaotic. They had no great scientific tradition. They built things that broke down constantly and then fixed them with tape and hope. The idea that they could succeed where the mighty had failed was absurd. But did not laugh. He stood perfectly still and waited for the noise to die down. "I am serious," he said. "I have studied the Ascendant for 300 years. I have read every record left behind by its builders, and I believe with complete certainty that humans are the only species in this galaxy who can bring that ship back to life." The ambassador rose from his seat. His silver skin glowed with anger. "This is an insult. You would trust the greatest technological treasure in history to a species that still uses combustion engines." "Yes," said simply, "I would." The council argued for 6 more hours. In the end, they had no choice. Every other option had failed. If a mechanic wanted to waste his time with humans, let him try. At least it would be entertaining to watch them fail. Far across the galaxy, on a small colony world called New Briar, a man named Danny was elbow-deep in a broken engine. Oil covered his hands and face. The mining rig he was fixing was older than he was, held together by replacement parts and stubbornness. But Danny liked the work. There was something satisfying about taking a broken thing and making it run again. "Danny," a voice called from outside the engine compartment. "You need to see this." Danny pulled himself out and wiped his hands on a rag. Vance stood in the doorway of their small workshop, her red hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was holding a data pad and looking at it like it might bite her. "What is it?" Danny asked. A job offer, said. I think maybe a joke, I honestly can't tell. She handed him the pad. Danny read it twice. Then he read it a third time. This says they want us to repair an alien ship, he said slowly. A 10,000-year-old alien ship, the Ascendant. I know what it says. This is worth more money than our whole colony makes in a year. I know that too. Danny looked around the workshop. Cole was welding in the corner, sparks flying around his dark skin. Heather Sims sat at her workbench, untangling a mess of wires. Their youngest crew member was sorting through a box of salvaged parts. They were good people, skilled workers, but they fixed mining equipment and old transports. They were not exactly qualified for legendary alien technology. It's got to be a scam, Danny said. Before could answer, the data pad beeped. A holographic image appeared above it. The figure was clearly alien. Old, 6 eyes that seemed to look right through Danny. My name is, the figure said, and I assure you this is no scam. I have spent 3 centuries searching for people like you. I need your help. The galaxy needs your help. Please, come to the Ascendant. Come and see what you can do. The message ended. Danny stared at the empty air where the hologram had been. So said, what do we do? Danny looked at his crew. He looked at the broken engine he had been fixing. He thought about spending the rest of his life on this dusty colony world, doing the same work day after day. Then he thought about a ship that had waited 10,000 years for someone to wake it up. Pack your tools, Danny said. We're going. Ascendant was bigger than Danny had imagined. Their small transport ship approached it slowly, and with every passing minute the ancient vessel grew larger in there. It blocked out the stars behind it. The dying red sun nearby cast strange shadows across its hull, making the ship look like it was breathing. That thing is the size of a city, said quietly. He stood behind Danny's chair, his welding gloves hanging from his belt. His voice held something rare for him, fear. The records say it carried 10,000 when it was active, Heather said. She was reading from her data pad, but her eyes kept drifting to the. It had gardens, libraries, factories, everything a civilization would need to travel forever. Pressed his face close to the glass like a child seeing snow for the first time. And no one can make it work. No one, confirmed. They sent their best engineers. They couldn't even figure out how to turn the lights on. Their transport docked at a small port on the Ascendant's side. The airlock hissed open and was waiting for them. In person, the old looked even more ancient than his hologram had suggested. His shell was cracked in places. He moved with the careful slowness of someone whose body had started to fail him, but those 6 eyes were alive with hope. You came, he said. I was not certain you would. We almost didn't, Danny admitted. This whole thing seems impossible. Impossible things are often the most worth attempting, replied. He gestured with one of his 4 arms. Come, let me show you what we are dealing with. They walked through the corridors of the Ascendant, and Danny understood immediately why the other species had failed. Nothing about this ship made sense. The walls were not metal or plastic or anything he recognized. They seemed to be made of a dark stone that was warm to the touch. Patterns covered every surface, lines and curves that almost looked like writing, but followed no language Danny had ever seen. The lighting came from crystals embedded in the ceiling. Some glowed bright, others were dark and dead. There was no obvious way to control them. They tried to connect their computers to the ship's systems, explained as they walked. The ship rejected every connection. They attempted to communicate with it using their oldest languages. The ship did not respond. It simply waits. Waits for what? Asked. His mandibles clicked together in what might have been a smile. That is the question, is it not? They reached a large chamber that had clearly been used as a workshop by previous repair teams. Equipment lay scattered everywhere. Data pads filled with frustrated notes, tools that had been thrown against walls. Someone had written "impossible" on one of the crystal panels in black marker. "This is where the worked said. They left behind their notes. You may find them useful, or you may not." He stepped back toward the door. "I will leave you to explore. I have found that too much guidance can sometimes prevent discovery." And then he was gone, and the 5 humans were alone in the heart of an ancient alien ship. "Well," said, cracking his knuckles, "let's see what we've got." They spread out through the ship. Danny gave simple instructions. "Look at everything, touch everything. Try to understand how this vessel was put together. Do not break anything if you can help it." For the first few hours, nothing happened. The ship was beautiful but silent. Its systems stayed dark. Its doors stayed closed. Danny began to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake coming here. Then found the damaged conduit. It was in a small room off the main corridor. A section of the wall had cracked open, revealing a mess of crystalline structures inside. Some of the crystals were shattered. Others were dark when they should have been glowing. It looked like a wound in the ship's body. "This is fried," said, examining the damage. "Looks like some kind of power relay, but I have no idea how it's supposed to work." Danny came to look. The crystals were unlike anything he had seen. There were no wires, no circuits, just these strange formations that seemed to grow out of the wall like plants. "Maybe we should document it first," Danny said. "Take pictures, make notes, figure out what we're dealing with before we try anything." But was not listening. He had taken off his glove and was reaching toward the broken crystals. His bare hand touched the largest one. The crystal lit up. Not brightly, just a soft glow like a candle in a dark room, but it was light where there had been no light before. "What did you do?" Danny demanded. "Nothing," said. He sounded as surprised as anyone. "I just touched it. I was thinking about how the energy should flow through here and then." He moved his hand to another crystal. This one lit up too, then another. One by one, the crystals in the damaged relay began to glow, following the path of his fingers. In another part of the ship, Heather was having her own strange experience. She had found a corridor where the lighting had completely failed. The crystals in the ceiling were cold and dead. Using her training, she tried to trace the problem. There had to be a break somewhere in the system, a disconnection. She closed her eyes and ran her fingers along the wall. She was not sure why. It just felt like the right thing to do, and as she moved, she began to sense something. A kind of pressure, a flow, like water running through a pipe. "There," she whispered, stopping at one spot. "The break is here." She opened her eyes. There was no visible damage at that location, but when she pressed her palm against the wall, she felt the crystals inside warm up. The lights flickered. Then they came on, one after another, spreading down the corridor like a sunrise. Discovery was the strangest of all. She had found a sealed door that had been marked UNOPENABLE by the team. Every attempt to hack it or force it had failed. Stood in front of it, studying the patterns carved into its surface. Without thinking, she began to hum. It was just a simple tune, a song her mother used to sing when was small. The melody filled the empty corridor. The door opened. Stumbled backward in shock. The massive door slid apart smoothly, silently, as if it had been waiting for exactly that song. When they gathered back in the workshop to share what had happened, no one could explain it. The ship was responding to them, not to their technology, not to their commands, but to something else, something deeper. "It's like the ship can feel what we're thinking," said. He sounded scared and excited at the same time. Danny looked around at his crew. Then he looked at the walls of the ancient ship, covered in patterns that almost looked like they were listening. "Maybe that's exactly what's happening," he said. Somewhere in the shadows watched them. His old eyes were wet with emotion. After 300 years of searching, he had finally found them. The ones who could understand. Word of the humans' progress spread quickly through the galaxy. Within days, every major species knew that the impossible was happening. The Ascendant, silent for 10,000 years, was slowly coming back to life under human hands. Not everyone was happy about this. A delegation of engineers arrived at the ship without warning. Their shuttle docked at the same port the humans had used. Their leader was a tall female named. Her silver skin was polished to a mirror shine, and her eyes were cold as she stepped aboard. "We are here to observe," she announced. "The Council has concerns about your methods." Danny met them at the airlock. He kept his voice calm, but his jaw was tight. "We're doing the job we were hired to do. What concerns could there be?" "The concern," said, "is that you are succeeding where we failed. The Council wants to understand how. We will watch you work." There was nothing Danny could do. The contract allowed for observation. He led the team into the ship and tried to continue the repairs as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. They watched every move the humans made, they recorded everything, and they questioned everything. When placed his hands on a damaged power node and felt his way through the repair, they demanded to know what instrument he was using. When he said he was not using any instrument, they accused him of hiding technology. When Heather closed her eyes and traced a broken energy line by touch alone, they scanned her for hidden implants. They found nothing. This made them angrier. When hummed to a stubborn door and it opened, stepped forward with fury in her eyes. "This is a trick," she said. "You have found some frequency code, some hidden mechanism. You are not really doing what you appear to be doing." "We're not hiding anything," said. "This is just how the ship responds to us. We don't fully understand it either." "Impossible," spat. "Technology does not work this way. Machines do not respond to feelings, to songs, to the touch of primitive hands." Was working on a navigation console nearby. He was the youngest of the crew, and the constant criticism was getting to him. His hands were shaking as he tried to connect two crystalline components. They stood over him, watching, waiting for him to fail. Took a deep breath. He stopped thinking about the pressure. He just focused on the console. He could feel where the components wanted to go. It was like putting together a puzzle where the pieces told you where they belonged. He made the connection. The console lit up with a soft blue glow. For the first time in 10,000 years, the navigation system was active. Stared at the glowing console, her face twisted with disbelief. Then it twisted with something worse, suspicion. "This is sabotage," she said loudly. "You have done something to this ship. You have corrupted its systems to respond only to you. This is a plot to claim technology for your species alone." "That's insane," Danny said. "We're just mechanics, we fix things, that's all we know how to do." "I will report this to the Council," said. "I will tell them that humanity cannot be trusted, that you are manipulating this sacred vessel for your own gain." She turned and marched back toward her shuttle, her team following behind her. The accusation hung in the air like poison. That night Danny could not sleep. He walked through the quiet corridors of the Ascendant, running his hands along the warm walls. The ship felt different now. Alive, almost. He could sense a kind of hum beneath his fingers, like a heartbeat. He found in the ancient engine room. The old sat on the floor, surrounded by darkness. Only a few crystals glowed here, casting strange shadows across his gray shell. "You knew this would happen," Danny said. "It was not a question." 6 eyes looked up at him. "I suspected. The other species do not like being surpassed, especially not by those they consider inferior." Danny sat down across from him. "Tell me the truth, all of it. Why us? Why are we able to do things that nobody else can do? What is it about humans?" For a long moment was silent. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with age and memory. 300 years ago I was young, strong, full of curiosity. I was part of an expedition that discovered an archive on a dead moon. Most of the data was corrupted, but some records survived, including the writings of their final generation." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "They were not like us, not like thee or any species that exists today. They did not build with logic alone. They built with passion, with instinct. Their technology was meant to be felt, not just understood. To them, a machine was not separate from the being who used it. It was an extension of the soul. That sounds like poetry, Danny said, not engineering. There was no difference. His mandibles clicked softly. When they left this galaxy, they knew their creations would be found by others. They left behind a description, a prophecy, some might call it. They described the beings who would one day be capable of understanding their work. Danny felt a chill run down his spine, and the description matched no species I knew. Beings who thought with their hearts as much as their minds, who solved problems through instinct and adaptation, who created art and music and stories, who refused to think in straight lines. Leaned forward, his eyes bright. I searched for 300 years. I watched civilizations rise and fall. I studied every species I encountered, and then humanity appeared, young, chaotic, messy, but also creative, passionate, alive in ways that other species had forgotten how to be. You think we're like Danny said slowly. I think you are what the hoped would come after them, not their children, but their inheritors, the ones who could pick up what they left behind and carry it forward. Danny looked around the ancient engine room. He thought about his crew, about feeling his way through repairs, about Heather sensing energy flows, about singing to doors, about connecting crystals by instinct. They are going to report us to the council, he said. They're going to say we can't be trusted. Yes, agreed, they will. What do we do? The old arose slowly to his feet. His shell creaked with the movement. You finish what you started. You prove to the galaxy that there is more than one way to think, more than one way to build, more than one way to understand the universe. He placed one of his 4 hands on Danny's shoulder. You show them what humanity can do. Explosion came without warning. Danny was in the main workshop when the floor shook beneath his feet. The lights flickered. A deep groaning sound filled the ship, like a giant animal in pain. Then alarms began to scream. What's happening? Shouted over the noise. Before Danny could answer, a second explosion rocked the ship. The crystals in the walls pulsed red. Emergency bulkheads began to slam shut throughout the corridors. The Ascendant, which had been slowly coming back to life, was now tearing itself apart. Danny grabbed his communicator. Heather, report. Static, then's voice, broken and distant. I'm in the lower decks. Something hit the power core. Crystals are going crazy down here. I can't get back to you. The doors are sealed. Heather came through next. I'm near the navigation room. There's fire everywhere. The energy lines are overloading. Someone did this on purpose, Danny. This wasn't an accident. His voice was the worst, weak, scared. I'm hurt. Ceiling fell on my leg. I can't move. I'm in Section 7. Danny's heart pounded. His crew was scattered across a dying ship. Communications were failing, and somewhere in the chaos was also trapped. Stay here and try to keep communications working. I'm going to find the others. Danny, wait. But he was already running. What Danny did not know was that this disaster had been carefully planned. Admiral of the fleet had listened to his report with growing alarm. The humans were succeeding. The Ascendant was responding to them. If this continued, humanity would control the most powerful ship in the galaxy. They would have access to technology that could change everything. Could not allow this. He had sent agents aboard during the chaos of the inspection. They had planted devices in the ship's core systems, devices designed to trigger a cascade failure. The Ascendant would destroy itself, and the humans would be blamed for the disaster. 2 problems solved at once. Now those devices had activated, and the ancient ship was dying. Danny ran through corridors filled with smoke and sparks. The walls, once warm and welcoming, now pulsed with dangerous energy. Crystals that had glowed soft blue were now burning red. He could feel the ship's pain. It was not just a machine to him anymore. It was alive and it was suffering. He found first. The young man was pinned under a fallen beam, his face pale with pain. His leg was bent at a bad angle. "Hold on," Danny said. He grabbed the beam and pulled with all his strength. It did not move. He pulled harder, nothing. Then he remembered what he had learned about this ship. It responded to feeling, to intention, to need. Danny pressed his hands against the beam. He closed his eyes. He thought about how much he needed to save him, about how desperately he wanted this ship to help. The beam shifted, not because Danny was strong enough to move it, but because the ship moved it for him. The crystals in the floor glowed briefly, and the weight lifted just enough for to pull himself free. "Can you walk?" Danny asked. Tested his leg. It hurt, but nothing was broken. "I think so, yeah." "Good, get to the workshop, help." Danny kept moving. He found Heather next, trapped in a room surrounded by fire. The flames were not normal fire. They were energy discharges from the overloading power lines, blue and white and deadly. Heather stood in the center of the room, her eyes closed, her hands pressed against the wall. "I can feel where the breaks are," she said without looking at him. "The power is looping back on itself, if I can redirect it." "Can you do it?" "I don't know, maybe. I just have to think like the ship thinks." She took a deep breath. Her fingers moved across the wall, tracing patterns that only she could see. The fire flickered, dimmed. The energy found new paths to follow, flowing away from the room instead of into it. The flames died. Heather opened her eyes and nearly collapsed. Danny caught her. "I've got you, come on." Was the hardest to reach. He was deep in the lower decks, near the heart of the ship's power core. When Danny finally found him, the big man was holding a collapsing support beam with his bare hands. Behind him, a section of the core was exposed, crystals pooling wildly. "Someone planted something in here," said through gritted teeth. "A device. It's causing all of this, but I can't let go of this beam or the whole section collapses." Danny looked at the device. It was small, metallic, obviously not technology. It sat in the center of the crystal formation like a poison in a heart. "I'll get it," Danny said. "If you touch it wrong, it might explode." "Then I won't touch it wrong." Danny reached into the crystal formation. The energy burned his skin. He could feel the device humming with malicious purpose. Someone had designed this to kill the ship, to kill them. But the ship did not want to die. Danny could feel that too. After 10,000 years of waiting, the Ascendant had finally found beings who understood it. It was not ready to let go. Danny wrapped his hand around the device. He did not pull it out. Instead, he held it steady and thought. He imagined the energy flowing away from the device. He imagined the crystals healing around it. He imagined the ship whole and alive and powerful. The crystals responded. They grew. They wrapped around the device, trapping it, containing it. The humming stopped. The danger passed. Finally let go of the beam. His arms shook with exhaustion. "How did you do that?" "I didn't," Danny said. "The ship did, I just asked." They found in a section that had lost all atmosphere. The Olda was barely conscious, his shell cracked from the pressure changes, had managed to restore life support just in time. She had done it by singing to the environmental controls, a lullaby her grandmother had taught her. It should not have worked, but on this ship it did. The crew gathered in the main workshop, battered and exhausted but alive. Around them the Ascendant slowly stabilized. The red warning lights faded back to blue. The alarms fell silent. "Someone tried to kill us," Heather said. "Someone tried to kill the ship." Though growled, "Has to be." Danny looked at his crew. He looked at, barely conscious, on the floor. He looked at the walls of the ancient ship, still glowing softly with life. "They failed," he said. "We're still here. The ship is still here, and we're going to finish what we started." Outside, the dying red sun cast its light across the hull of the Ascendant. The ship had survived. and it was waiting to show the galaxy what it could truly do. 3 days after the sabotage, Danny stood alone in the central chamber of the Ascendant. His crew had worked without rest to repair the damage. Every broken system, every shattered crystal, every wound the ship had suffered. They had fixed it all. Now the ship hummed with power. Real power. Not the faint glow of a sleeping machine, but the deep vibration of something fully alive. The central chamber was the heart of the Ascendant, a vast circular room with walls covered in the largest crystals Danny had ever seen. They stretched from floor to ceiling, each one as tall as a house. In all the weeks they had spent aboard, this room had remained dark and silent. The previous repair teams had not even been able to open its doors. But now it was open, and it was glowing. Stood beside Danny, Heather, limping slightly but refusing to stay behind, weak but determined to see this moment. They had all gathered here because the ship had called them, not with words, with feeling. They all knew it was time. "What do we do?" asked. His voice echoed in the massive chamber. Danny stepped forward. He placed his hand on the largest crystal. It was warm, almost hot. He could feel energy flowing through it like blood through a vein. "We wake it up," he said. He closed his eyes. He thought about everything they had been through. The journey here, the impossible repairs, the sabotage, the fear, the hope. He thought about his crew, about the ancient beings who had built this ship 10,000 years ago. And then he thought about humanity, about their messy, chaotic, beautiful way of existing, about how they solved problems by feeling their way through, about how they created art and music and stories, about how they refused to give up even when logic said they should. The crystal blazed with light. All around the chamber, the massive crystals activated one by one. Colors Danny had no names for filled the air. The whole room seemed to expand, opening up into something impossible, a space larger than the chamber should have held. Then the holograms appeared. They rose from the floor like ghosts, tall beings with flowing forms and gentle eyes, not as they had been in death, but as they had been in life, a recording left behind for this exact moment. One hologram stepped forward. Its voice was soft but filled the entire chamber. "If you are seeing this, then you are the ones we waited for." The crew stood frozen, barely breathing. "We are the 10,000 years ago, we chose to leave this plane of existence, to transcend the physical form and explore what lies beyond, but we could not take everything with us. Our greatest creation, this vessel, had to stay behind." The hologram gestured at the ship around them. "The Ascendant is more than a ship. It is a seed, a gift, technology that can carry any civilization forward by thousands of years, but it could not be given to just anyone. We knew that the species who came after us would be different, logical, methodical, brilliant in their own ways, but unable to understand what we had built." The hologram smiled. It was a sad smile, but also hopeful. "So we designed the Ascendant to wait, to sleep, until beings came who could understand it, beings who thought the way we thought, who felt the way we felt, who built with their hearts as well as their minds." The hologram looked directly at Danny, at his crew, as if it could truly see them across 10,000 years. "You are those beings, the inheritors we hoped would come. We do not know your name, we do not know your history, but we know your nature, and we trust you with our legacy." The hologram began to fade. "Use what we have left behind. Learn from it, grow from it, and when you are ready, perhaps you too will transcend. Perhaps we will meet again in whatever lies beyond. Until then, carry our memory forward, build with passion, create with joy, never lose the chaos that makes you alive." The holograms vanished. The chamber fell silent. But the ship did not go dark. Instead, it grew brighter. Systems that had been dormant were activated. Screens came to life showing maps of the galaxy. Data flooded through the crystals, information about technologies the current species could barely imagine. The Ascendant was fully awake, and it had chosen its new crew. The news spread across the galaxy within hours. The Galactic Council demanded an emergency session. Admiral tried to flee but was arrested by his own people. The evidence of his sabotage was undeniable. The devices his agents had planted were clearly technology. His attempt to destroy the ship and blame humanity had failed completely. The council chamber was silent as Danny stood before them. He was still wearing his work clothes, stained with oil and crystal dust. He had not had time to change. He had not wanted to. "You have proven us wrong," the council speaker said. The words seemed to cost him effort. "Humanity has accomplished what no other species could. The Ascendant has chosen you." "It didn't choose us," Danny said. "It recognized us. There's a difference." He looked around the chamber at all the representatives. 100 other species. Some looked angry, some looked afraid, but some, just a few, looked curious, hopeful. They built their technology for beings who think differently, who feel their way through problems, who create and imagine and refuse to fit into boxes. Maybe that's us right now, but it doesn't have to only be us. He took a deep breath. The Ascendant carries knowledge that can help everyone. We're not going to hoard it. We're not going to use it as a weapon. We're going to share it, because that's what the wanted, not for one species to dominate, but for all of us to grow. The chamber erupted in noise, arguments, debates, questions, but underneath it all something had shifted. Humanity was no longer the young primitive species to be laughed at. They were something new, something important. Outside the council chamber waited. When Danny emerged, the Olda was smiling. His shell was still cracked, his body was still weak, but his eyes were at peace. 300 years, said. I spent 300 years searching for you. I was beginning to think I would die before I found you. Danny clasped his hand. You didn't just find us, you believed in us when no one else would. Someone had to. Looked up at the stars visible through the council station's windows. The galaxy has been thinking the same way for too long. It needed someone to remind it that there are other ways, better ways, ways that involve the heart as much as the mind. Danny thought about his crew waiting on the Ascendant, about the journey ahead of them, about all the things they could build and discover and create. So what happens now? He asked. His mandibles clicked together in a sound Danny had learned was laughter. Now you show the galaxy what humanity can do, and I, old as I am, finally get to see what comes next. High above them, the Ascendant hung in space. Its hull gleamed in the starlight. Its crystals pulsed with energy and life. For 10,000 years it had waited. Now it was ready to fly again, and humanity would be at the helm, carrying the dreams of the past into a future no one could predict.